Hi, welcome to part 2 of the presentation about how to give a decent presentation. Part 2 is about doing the actual presentation. If you came here without watching part 1, please head back to part 1, which helps you choose why to present, how to present, and what to present. Recapping part 1. Presenting is the art of transferring information to build a house of knowledge in the minds of your audience. It's very important to work on this because no amount of presentation skills and tweaking and correct fonts and clip art and photos and movies will make up for presenting the wrong thing. To generate great presentation materials, you need to answer the following questions. Who are you presenting to? Why are you presenting? What is the goal of your presentation? What would your audience be interested in and what will you be telling them? And finally, how will you structure your presentation? Schematically, this looks like this. The why and the who of your presentation determine what you could be presenting. So if you thought it through correctly, then you will be presenting things that your audience is actually interested in. From the what to present flow the how to build the presentation, how to structure your story, how to transfer the information so you can build knowledge in the minds of your listeners. And finally, from that flows also how you can structure the presentation so that people will be paying attention to the very end. This final part is what this second part of the presentation is all about. So, presenting is not unidirectional. It's important to sort of engage the audience in what you are doing. The surest way of killing any chance of engaging the audience is to read your presentation from a piece of paper. Try very hard not to do this. For many people, they will get great benefit from some notes, and that's fine to make sure that you don't skip parts, and that works very well. But by all means, do not read your presentation from a piece of paper. Presenting is hard enough work already, and for many people, it takes their entire attention. But if you have a little spare brain cycles available during your presentation, look around and study your audience. If you're going too fast, you can see that. You can see people that from the look in their eyes, you can see that they're not really figuring out what you're onto anymore. That might be because you're going too fast, but it could also be because you are being too theoretical for your audience. So if you see them not getting it, either slow down, or if you think, well, maybe we need some more excitement, try spicing it up. Some good ways of spicing up a presentation are including an anecdote. An anecdote makes the story personal. It binds people in. It makes it real. It's a little bit of break from the theory. If something funny happened during your research, that also works because funny things are also great ways of getting people to pay attention. If you find that your audience is drifting off and you have an extra theoretical slide that expands the mathematics of your research, feel free to skip it. Don't feel bad about skipping things where you're pretty sure that most of your audience are not paying attention or are not really waiting for it. The other thing is, if you see someone that wants to ask a question, that's also a great way to engage the audience. So while it might interrupt the flow of your story, answering a question from the public is a great way for people to sit up and pay attention. And as a final trick, you can just fake this. Look through the audience a little bit. Look left, look right, and this makes people feel included, as if you're really in contact with them. And it's of course great if you truly are in contact with them, but you can just fake it by just looking around a little bit. The slides versus you. This is a complicated thing. You should be telling the story and not your slides. If the entire story is within the slides, then there would be no reason for you to show up at all. So the slides are a backdrop to your story, and they can help provide context, and they can also help people get back on track. So let's say you are telling a complicated story and someone had a hard time following one sentence of what you said, and because they didn't follow that sentence, all the rest of your story no longer makes sense either. Your slides provide a form of redundancy so that if people didn't quite follow one sentence, then maybe they can get back on track by looking at your slide and seeing, oh, I see what this guy meant. The other very important thing why you need slides is because some things just need pictures or graphs. Um, don't overestimate how well people can see. Or the other way around, make sure that your fonts are big enough for people to read. This is important for text, but it also holds for the legendas of any graphs that you are presenting. And finally, even though people obsess over the slides, you should be spending far more time on what you should be telling and how you should be structuring the story than obsessing over font sizes and other things. Let's say you have great material. It's just what people are waiting for. They really want to hear this from you, but the fonts look like crap. No one cares. That's fine. Um, However, let's say your content is just not that great and it's not that interesting, but the fonts are tremendous. Then no one will be coming up to you and say, "Wow, I didn't catch your story and I found it boring, but thank you for the great fonts." So in general, spend more time on the what to tell and how to tell it than on the fonts. However, um, it is still important, and especially in terms of balance. And this presentation itself is an example of that tension. On the internet these days, it's common to say, "Well, that's too long, and I didn't read." And everybody will tell you that's too long and less text and more funny cat pictures, please. And to a great extent, that's true, but that does not mean that you can reduce your entire presentation to one lolcat. So if you really spend time thinking on this, well, what does this tension mean? Well, too much text on screen is distracting to the audience as you are speaking, because they will start reading your slides, and when people are reading, they're not listening to you. So if you have too much text on a slide, it will distract your audience. However, if you have too little text on your slide, when people later come home from your presentation and decide to take another look at your work, it doesn't help if all they have is a slide that says great performance, great security, great stability. That doesn't say much. So there's the tension there. Add sufficient text to slides that it makes sense for people who read it afterwards, but not too much so they spend all time reading your slides. An optimum situation is to have slides that are pretty brief, but make sure that in the materials that are distributed to the audience later on, that there are notes for each slide that expand on the actual contents themselves. And that allows you to have brief slides during the presentation, but still provide context later on. The balance is hard to find, and whatever you do, someone will always be unhappy. And you probably have achieved success if people just complain well enough on both sides that there was too little text or too much text. So to appease these people, here's a funny picture. Pictures serve a serious purpose in presentations, and even funny pictures can be good at just making the audience stay awake and pay attention. A funny picture is good because it makes people laugh. But if you have a picture of your servers or your lab setting or your research environment or whatever, that also helps drag people into the story because again it makes it personal, it makes it a story. So by all means, add pictures to your presentations. Okay, this one hurts. Even the most glorious of formulas, and these are the most glorious formulas that I know, have very little place in a presentation. Unless you are actually teaching mathematics or actually presenting a cryptographic breakthrough, most of the time mentioning formulas, even ones as glorious as these, is lost to most of the audience. Even professionals will not gain extra understanding if you start doing math on screen. There are a few exceptions to this, like for example when you actually are presenting maths, and the other one is where you, for example, have an equation that describes the runtime of an algorithm, and you can just show, look, the third term will dominate over time. But otherwise, yeah, please refrain from doing too much formulas. The same thing applies to tables. Tables are an embodiment often of a large amount of work. People are proud of their tables. They worked hard, they benchmarked 25 different scenarios on 12 different CPUs and different configuration, everything. So a table with data is, well, reflects a great personal investment, and it's therefore highly tempting to actually show it to people. The problem is that even a trivial table has so much numbers on them they're barely readable on a projector screen. And also they suffer from the problem that we mentioned earlier, that if you provide lots of data, people will spend time looking at the data and not listening to you. Luckily enough, there is a solution, and this is called the graph. And graphs actually work very well during presentations, especially when they tell a story. So a graph that clearly shows that New York is warmer than San Francisco later in the year, and the other way around earlier in the year, that works very well. But do make sure that if you show a graph, that people could, at least in theory, read the text that is on the axis, and also that you describe on the graph itself what people are looking at. Because if you explain what the graph is, but you don't tell in the slide, then when people are back home, the graph no longer makes sense to them. So please add graphs, but do make sure that they are well labeled. Some very practical things. If you have a presentation and it starts at 1, be there at 12:30. Why? Well, for one thing, don't be an optimist. All projection and audio techniques fail far more often than you think. And many people will say, oh, I always plug in my laptop and it just works. In my experience, it doesn't work that way. So show up on time, because that gives you a lot of opportunity to find another laptop, find a spare cable, etc., etc. Also, the room might not be where you think it is. Not all conferences have good labeling, and sometimes it's confusing. I've been to a conference where room C was very far away from room A, and actually room C was on the first floor and room A was on the third floor. So just be there on time. If you arrive early, that gives you a great chance to put up the title page of your presentation already, because anyone wandering by and seeing your wonderful title, because you worked on that in part 1 of the presentation, will have a chance to join in. And also, presenting is well, people can get nervous from it. So if you are there on time, it gives you time to calm down, drink a glass of water, etc., etc. Other practical notes is practice. Seriously. Many people will say, oh, this guy, he's so good at doing presentations. And let me tell you, they sweated over the presentation for 8 hours. At least. They went over it many, many times. So seriously, practice and do your presentation in your hotel room or in your tent or at home, whatever. Go through your presentation and do the presentation. You can speak out loud, you can do it mentally, but go through it slide by slide. It makes life so much easier. And even the most professional presenters, they do this. Another practical thing, if you have further reading or a whole bunch of links, it doesn't make a huge amount of sense to present URLs at a conference unless you are very sure that people can get a hold of a copy of your presentation later on. The one chance you have of providing a URL that people remember is make a tiny URL that references your presentation. And if you spend a little bit of time, you might even create a tiny URL that people can remember. And also link to that tiny URL at the beginning and at the end of your presentation, and also add contact information there too, so that people can reach you. Some other practical things. It has to work. There are far more people in the audience than you are, and we don't want to disappoint them. Many conferences these days offer the ability to upload or email your presentation in advance as a PDF, and they will project it for you. And the wonderful thing of this is that you are running from a well-tested configuration. So you don't have to discover that your laptop will only do widescreen aspect ratios and the projector will not. So if there is any chance at all to get them to project your presentation for you, send it out as a PDF. If you have a PowerPoint presentation or a keynote presentation or an open office presentation, it will not come out the same way you put it in. Distribute your presentation as a PDF. And that even works for animations, by the way. If you are not taking advantage of the conference facilities to project your presentation, defense in depth is important. Show up with a fully charged laptop. Make sure that you have the little piece of cable that allows you to connect a projector to your Apple. Um, if you also bring your presentation on a USB drive as a PDF, and finally have a URL in mind that you can type into a laptop should there be internet and everything else doesn't work. And that URL should then, of course, point to your presentation. You might think, well, this is a bit much. I've needed all these tricks at several occasions in order to be able to present. So arrive fully prepared. Live demos. If you do these, make very sure that they will work. Don't assume you will have working internet during a presentation, because even though in theory you might have that by the time the room is full with 100 people and they're firing up their laptops and iPads, you might no longer have working wireless internet. So if you do live demos, make really sure that you do not depend on things that might not work during your presentation, because it has to work. Okay, here's some further reading. The first is a link with a lot of text, a wall of text on how to give a good presentation that recaps a little bit of the things that we discussed before. The second link is by Emily Lakdawalla, and it touches on loads of things, and her link really inspired this presentation, but it goes beyond what I did, and also helps with how to approach the audience and other things. So it's a highly recommended link. And finally, if you are presenting at OHM 2013, the Hacker Conference, and you need help with your presentation, please feel free to contact me, because I would love to help you out and help you do a better presentation. Well, thank you for your attention, and I hope this has been of use for you.